3 armed men had come to rob the gas station. They thought it would be an easy target. An old attendant, a young cashier, a few customers. There was just one thing they didn't know. The silent man behind the counter was actually a former Delta Force sniper, and in exactly 2.3 seconds he would remind them why silence is sometimes the most dangerous weapon of all. Welcome to the Untold Stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of silence, skill, and split-second decisions, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you look at every quiet person you pass on the street. The Shell station on Route 84 wasn't much to look at. Fluorescent lights flickered over 4 pumps, casting harsh shadows across cracked pavement. For most people driving through Cedar Creek, Texas, it was just another pit stop. But for the 1,200 residents of this small town, Murphy's Shell had been home to the quietest man anyone had ever met for the past 8 years. Robert Bob Sullivan showed up every morning at exactly 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before his shift officially started. He wore the same rotation of 3 blue uniform shirts, dark blue Levi's, and steel-toed Red Wing boots polished to a dull shine. Bob was 58 years old, stood exactly 6 feet 2 inches, and maintained the same 185-pound weight he'd carried since his military discharge. His hair had gone gray, and he kept it cut short, military short, though no one in Cedar Creek knew what regulation he'd once followed. Every morning, Bob would unlock the front door, disable the alarm, and flip the switches that brought the station to life. Pumps online, lights on, coffee brewing, security cameras checked, all accomplished in the same order, every single day, with the kind of precision that spoke of muscle memory trained for more critical tasks. But what the people of Cedar Creek didn't know was that every morning, Bob Sullivan also checked something else hidden beneath the counter. A Glock 19, loaded, clean, ready, because Robert James Sullivan wasn't just any gun owner. He was a man who'd once made 200 confirmed kills and never missed once. For 8 years, Bob had perfected the art of being invisible. He spoke only when necessary, never talked about himself. When customers tried to make conversation, he had responses that killed dialogue without offense. "Nice weather we're having." "Yep. What did you do before this?" "Different work." The people of Cedar Creek had theories. Mrs. Henderson thought he was a widower. Tommy Rodriguez figured him for an ex-con. The high school kids thought he was just weird. But Jake Morrison, the 19-year-old college freshman who worked evenings, had a different theory. Jake was majoring in psychology and had written a paper about PTSD in veterans. Something about the way Bob moved, the way his eyes tracked every customer, reminded Jake of his uncle who'd done 3 tours in Iraq. "I think he's military," Jake had told his girlfriend. Like, serious military. What Jake didn't know was that Bob had heard every word. Bob's hearing was still sharp enough to catch conversations from across the store, sharp enough to hear a car door slam from 100 yards away, sharp enough to detect trouble coming. Skills like that don't fade. They just wait. But to understand Bob Sullivan, we need to go back to a mountain ridge in Afghanistan, October 15th, 2010, the day that changed everything. Staff Sergeant Robert Sullivan lay prone on a rocky outcrop, his Barrett M82 sniper rifle steady against his shoulder. Through the scope, he could see the compound below, exactly as intelligence had shown. His team was positioned in the valley. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, team leader. Sergeant Tony Chen, demolitions. Sergeant Dave Johnson, communications. And Sergeant Rick O'Connor, medic and close-quarter specialist. Good men, the best. They'd worked together for 3 years and never lost a team member. "Ghost? This is Overwatch," crackled his earpiece. "Target confirmed. Hold position for go signal." Bob's jaw tightened. They'd been waiting 3 hours. Through his scope, he watched sentries getting restless, changing positions. Then he saw it, a glint of metal from a ridge 400 yards left, a sniper scope catching morning sun, then another, and another. Overwatch, we have a problem. I count at least 3 enemy snipers. My team is in a kill zone. 2.7 seconds of silence. Bob counted them. In those seconds, he made the decision that would haunt him forever. Overwatch, I'm taking the shot. Ghost, you do not have permission to... Bob squeezed the trigger. The Taliban commander fell. Clean kill, center mass. But it was too late. The enemy had been waiting for exactly that moment. The valley erupted in gunfire. Ghost, this is Reaper 1. Mike Rodriguez's voice exploded through comms. We are taking heavy fire. 3 snipers on the ridgeline, 20+ ground forces. Bob was already moving. When he reached his team's position, Dave Johnson was dead. Tony Chen was unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. Rick O'Connor was treating Tony while returning fire, and Mike Rodriguez was gone, dragged into the compound. Rick, can you move? I can try, but Tony needs a medevac. Overwatch, this is Ghost. I need immediate extraction for 2 wounded. Ghost, nearest extraction is 5 miles south. You are ordered to extract immediately. Bob stared at the compound. Somewhere inside, Mike Rodriguez was being tortured for information that could get more Americans killed. Overwatch, say again. Ghost, you are ordered to extract immediately. That is a direct order. Bob looked at his wounded teammates, then at the compound where his team leader was probably already dead. He made the second decision that would define his life. Overwatch, this is Ghost. I'm going dark. He turned off his radio. What happened next was never officially recorded. Bob moved like a shadow across the compound's outer wall. The enemy expected a frontal assault, not a single operator with the patience of a hunter. Bob had ammunition for maybe 20 minutes. He had rage for a lifetime. 7 men died without knowing what killed them. Bob's knife did most of the work, quieter, more personal. He found Mike Rodriguez in a basement room, chained to a chair, face unrecognizable from beating, barely alive. Mike, can you hear me? Mike's swollen eyes opened. Ghost? How did you... Later. Can you walk? Bob helped his team leader up, supporting most of his weight. They were halfway to the outer wall when helicopters appeared. Multiple aircraft coming fast. Ghost, they're coming back. Lots of them. Bob looked at the wall 50 yards away, then at Mike, who could barely stand. The helicopters were 2 minutes out. Mike, I'm getting you to that wall. There's a gap on the north side. Keep moving south to extraction, 5 miles. What about you? Bob checked his weapons. 3 magazines for his rifle, 2 for sidearm, 4 grenades. Against 50 fresh fighters landing in minutes. I'm buying you time. 4 helicopters landed. Bob counted them through his scope, each carrying 24 soldiers, 80 fresh fighters against 1 Delta Force operator. Bob had positioned himself in a 2-story building overlooking the landing zone. He'd booby-trapped the stairs with grenades. His first shot took out the pilot before engines shut down. The aircraft lurched sideways, rotors clipping the second helicopter. Both exploded. For 27 minutes, Bob Sullivan held an entire Taliban regiment at bay. He killed 37 fighters, wounded dozens more, destroyed 2 helicopters and a communications truck. He did it with surgical precision, never wasting a shot. But even Delta Force operators run out of ammunition. Bob fired his last rifle round at 14:47 hours. Then he drew his sidearm, 17 rounds against 30 surviving fighters. His pistol claimed 7 more lives in 15 minutes, each shot carefully placed for maximum psychological impact. By 1500 hours, the compound had gone quiet. Survivors were either dead, wounded, or retreating. Bob had used his last bullet to kill a young fighter who couldn't have been 17. The boy had been carrying medical supplies, trying to reach wounded comrades. Bob's shot was clean, merciful. The boy died instantly. But as Bob holstered his empty weapon, he realized the kid had been a medic, not a fighter. A 17-year-old trying to save lives. Bob had killed a medic, a boy who'd been trying to help. Extraction helicopters arrived at 1517. They found Bob sitting among the bodies, weapons empty, knife bloody. Mike Rodriguez survived. Rick got Tony to safety. Dave Johnson's body was recovered. The official report credited Bob with saving his team. He was recommended for medals, promoted. But the report didn't mention the 17-year-old medic. It didn't mention 6 hours in a compound full of dead men. It didn't mention how Bob's hands shook for days after. It didn't mention the way Bob Sullivan started to break. The nightmares started 3 weeks after the operation. Bob would wake screaming, seeing the boy's face. The Army provided counseling. Bob attended every session, gave approved answers, never mentioned the medic. 6 months later, Bob was back in the field. Another operation, another target. Intel had located a weapons cache. Bob's job: eliminate guards, secure the site. He set up at dawn. Scope trained on the compound. 3 guards, just like Intel indicated. Bob's finger found the trigger. Through his scope, he saw the first target. A bearded man in his 30s, smoking, checking his watch, probably thinking about family. Bob held his breath, steadied his aim, squeezed the trigger. Nothing happened. Not equipment malfunction. Bob's finger simply refused to move. For the first time in his career, Staff Sergeant Robert Sullivan couldn't take the shot. He tried again. Same result. His mind was willing, training intact, but something deeper had stopped. The mission was scrubbed. Bob's team withdrew without completing their objective. 2 weeks later, Bob submitted his resignation, the last entry in his record: honorable discharge, end of service. 22 words summarizing 17 years of military service. That's how Robert Sullivan ended up at a gas station in Cedar Creek, Texas. Not because he couldn't do anything else, but because he didn't want to. Pumping gas, stocking shelves, tasks requiring no thought, no life or death decisions. Perfect work for a man who'd made too many of those decisions. The people of Cedar Creek saw a quiet man who did his job. They had no idea Bob Sullivan had once been one of the most dangerous men in the world, that he'd killed more enemy combatants than their entire police department combined, that he'd saved more American lives than anyone would count. Bob preferred it that way. Until tonight. 4 helicopters landed. Bob counted them through his scope, each carrying 24 soldiers, 80 fresh fighters, against 1 Delta Force operator. Bob had positioned himself in a 2-story building overlooking the landing zone. He'd booby-trapped the stairs with grenades. His first shot took out the pilot before engines shut down. The aircraft lurched sideways, rotors clipping the second helicopter. Both exploded. For 27 minutes, Bob Sullivan held an entire Taliban regiment at bay. He killed 37 fighters, wounded dozens more, destroyed 2 helicopters and a communications truck. He did it with surgical precision, never wasting a shot. But even Delta Force operators run out of ammunition. Bob fired his last rifle round at 14:47 hours. Then he drew his sidearm, 17 rounds against 30 surviving fighters. His pistol claimed 7 more lives in 15 minutes, each shot carefully placed for maximum psychological impact. By 1500 hours, the compound had gone quiet. Survivors were either dead, wounded, or retreating. Bob had used his last bullet to kill a young fighter who couldn't have been 17. The boy had been carrying medical supplies, trying to reach wounded comrades. Bob's shot was clean, merciful. The boy died instantly. But as Bob holstered his empty weapon, he realized the kid had been a medic, not a fighter. A 17-year-old trying to save lives. Bob had killed a medic, a boy who'd been trying to help. Extraction helicopters arrived at 1517. They found Bob sitting among the bodies, weapons empty, knife bloody. Mike Rodriguez survived. Rick got Tony to safety. Dave Johnson's body was recovered. The official report credited Bob with saving his team. He was recommended for medals, promoted. But the report didn't mention the 17-year-old medic. It didn't mention 6 hours in a compound full of dead men. It didn't mention how Bob's hands shook for days after. It didn't mention the way Bob Sullivan started to break. The nightmares started 3 weeks after the operation. Bob would wake screaming, seeing the boy's face. The Army provided counseling. Bob attended every session, gave approved answers, never mentioned the medic. 6 months later, Bob was back in the field. Another operation, another target. Intel had located a weapons cache. Bob's job: eliminate guards, secure the site. He set up at dawn. Scope trained on the compound. 3 guards, just like Intel indicated. Bob's finger found the trigger. Through his scope, he saw the first target, a bearded man in his 30s, smoking, checking his watch, probably thinking about family. Bob held his breath, steadied his aim, squeezed the trigger. Nothing happened. Not equipment malfunction. Bob's finger simply refused to move. For the first time in his career, Staff Sergeant Robert Sullivan couldn't take the shot. He tried again. Same result. His mind was willing, training intact, but something deeper had stopped. The mission was scrubbed. Bob's team withdrew without completing their objective. 2 weeks later, Bob submitted his resignation. The last entry in his record: honorable discharge, end of service. 22 words summarizing 17 years of military service. That's how Robert Sullivan ended up at a gas station in Cedar Creek, Texas. Not because he couldn't do anything else, but because he didn't want to. Pumping gas, stocking shelves, tasks requiring no thought, no life or death decisions. Perfect work for a man who'd made too many of those decisions. The people of Cedar Creek saw a quiet man who did his job. They had no idea Bob Sullivan had once been one of the most dangerous men in the world, that he'd killed more enemy combatants than their entire police department combined, that he'd saved more American lives than anyone would count. Bob preferred it that way, until tonight. It was 10:23 p.m. on a Tuesday, and Bob was counting the register when he noticed the white van. It had been sitting there 7 minutes, 6 minutes longer than any normal customer needed. Bob cataloged details automatically: Ford Transit, white, Texas plates, 3 occupants, engine running, lights off. Positioned to block the exit but with clear sight to the store entrance. Classic surveillance setup. Bob's hand moved above where he kept his Glock. His pulse remained steady. 8 years of civilian life hadn't dulled his instincts. Jake Morrison was behind the counter with his tablet. 2 customers were in the store. Mrs. Patterson buying cigarettes, and an old trucker Bob didn't recognize. "Jake," Bob said quietly, "I need you to go to the back room." Jake looked up. "Yeah?" "Stock check, take your phone. If anything happens, call 911 immediately." Something in Bob's tone registered. "Bob, is everything—" "Go, now." Jake went. Bob turned to the customers. "Folks, I need you to move to the back of the store, behind the refrigerators." Mrs. Patterson looked confused. "What's wrong?" The trucker was more perceptive. "How many?" 3, maybe more." The trucker nodded, understanding immediately. "I'll take the lady back." Bob watched them go, then reached for his Glock. Loaded, ready, reliable, just like Bob himself. The van doors opened at 10:26 p.m. 3 men got out, dark clothing, casual confidence. Bob watched through security monitors as they approached. The first man was tall, 6'4", prison tattoos on his forearms, the leader. The second was smaller, wiry, nervous energy, suggesting drugs. The third was young, maybe 25, with dead eyes, all armed. Bob could see bulges under jackets, the way they walked with right hands away from bodies. Handguns, probably semi-automatic. Amateur hour. Bob had faced Taliban fighters with military training and Russian weapons. These 3 looked like they'd learned tactics from movies. They were about to discover the difference between Hollywood and reality. The leader reached the door first, checked through glass. Bob made sure he was visible, looking bored and unaware. Just another minimum wage gas station attendant. The perfect victim. Hands up. This is a robbery. The leader's voice was loud, aggressive. He pulled a 9mm Beretta, holding it in what he thought was proper stance. The others spread out, flanking him. Bob raised his hand slowly. Okay, stay calm. I'll give you whatever you want. All the money. Now. Bob nodded, movements deliberate. He glanced at monitors, confirming positioning. Jake safe in back, customers out of line of fire. 3 robbers exactly where Bob wanted them. Triangle formation, 8 to 12 feet apart. Classic amateur setup. Too many movies, not enough tactical training. Bob's mind shifted to combat mode, muscle memory engaged. His hands were raised in surrender, but his brain calculated angles, distances, reaction times. 1 weapon, 17 rounds, 3 seconds before they realized their mistake. The money's in the register, Bob said calmly. I'll get it for you. He reached toward the register with his left hand while his right moved toward the counter. They watched his left hand, expecting him to open the cash drawer. They should have watched his right hand. What happened next took exactly 2.3 seconds. Second one, Bob's right hand found the Glock. Thumb disengaged safety, finger found trigger, grip settled into position used for over 200 kills. The robbers were still watching his left hand. Second two, Bob brought the weapon up and over the counter in one smooth motion. The leader saw movement, started to react, began swinging his weapon toward Bob. Too slow. Bob's first shot took the leader center mass. The 9mm hollow point struck below the sternum, expanded on impact. The leader was dead before hitting the floor. The second robber was turning when Bob's second shot caught him in the chest. Another center mass hit, another instant kill. Second three, the third robber was faster. He got his weapon up, almost managed to aim. Almost. Bob's third shot was a headshot, placed with surgical precision. The bullet entered above the left eyebrow, exited through the back of the skull. The robber collapsed instantly. Total time, 2.3 seconds, 3 shots fired, 3 hits, 3 kills. Bob lowered his weapon, breathing steady, pulse unchanged. Police Chief Thompson arrived with his entire night shift. They found 3 dead suspects, 4 witnesses, and 1 calm gas station attendant with legal firearm. Clear self-defense case, except for one detail Thompson noticed during interviews. Mr. Sullivan, you eliminated 3 armed suspects in 2.3 seconds. That's correct. Thompson studied crime scene photos. 3 perfect shots, no wasted ammunition. That's professional-level marksmanship. Where did you learn to shoot like that? I used to be in the military. What branch? Army. What was your MOS? Bob hesitated. 11 Bravo. Infantry would explain weapons training, but not precision shooting Thompson had witnessed. Mr. Sullivan, I've been a police officer 26 years. What you did tonight wasn't just good shooting. That was professional marksmanship. Before Bob could answer, Thompson's radio crackled. Chief, we have a priority call. Federal agent needs to speak with you about the shooting. Thompson looked at Bob, who had gone very still. Did you call the FBI? No, sir. This is someone else. Says he's with a special task force. Has all the incident details. Thompson felt ice in his veins. The shooting was 2 hours old. FBI might respond to multiple homicide, but wouldn't have details this fast. Tell him I'll call back in 10 minutes. Sir, he says it's urgent. Concerns the shooter's identity. Thompson looked at Bob again. The man's expression hadn't changed, but something was in his eyes now. Weary recognition. Mr. Sullivan, is there something you want to tell me before I take this call? Bob was quiet. Then, Chief, my real name isn't Bob Sullivan. Thompson took the call in his office with Bob across the desk. The federal agent didn't identify himself beyond a badge number. Chief Thompson, I understand you have a Robert Sullivan in custody. He's not in custody. He's a witness in justified shooting. Chief, listen carefully. The man you know as Robert Sullivan is actually Staff Sergeant Robert James Sullivan, formerly of Delta Force. He's been living under light cover for 8 years. Thompson looked at Bob, who was staring at his hands. Light cover, witness protection. Sergeant Sullivan participated in classified operations that made him a retaliation target. We relocated him with new identity. The 3 men who tried to rob your station weren't random criminals. They were professionals with military training, connected to international syndicates. We believe they specifically targeted Sergeant Sullivan. Bob looked up. That's impossible. Nobody knows who I am. Your identity was compromised 6 weeks ago. We've been trying to locate you for relocation. Why wasn't I told? We couldn't find you. You'd gone completely off-grid. Thompson struggled to process information. This wasn't random robbery. Assassination attempt made to look like robbery. These men were sent to kill Sergeant Sullivan. Who sent them? We're not certain, but intelligence suggests connections to organizations you've had contact with. Taliban remnants, Russian intelligence, others. How many others? Pause. In 17 years of active duty, you made many enemies. Some have long memories. Bob was shaking his head. I'm not running again. Sergeant, you don't have choice. If they found you once, they'll find you again. Then let them come. You are a valuable intelligence asset. Information you possess could compromise ongoing operations. You will submit to protective relocation. I'm not a sergeant anymore. I'm a civilian, and I'm staying put. Bob reached over and hung up the phone. You realize they'll be here within the hour, Thompson said. Probably sooner. And you're really resisting federal protective custody. Bob smiled for the first time Thompson had seen. It wasn't pleasant. Chief, I've been running 8 years, hiding, working meaningless jobs, pretending to be someone else. I'm tired of running. But if these people are after you, they'll keep coming until they find me, no matter where I hide. At least here, I know the terrain. Are you planning to turn my town into a war zone? Bob considered the question. I hope not, but if they come for me here, I won't go quietly, and I won't let innocent people get hurt. What do you need? The question surprised Bob. What? You heard me. If you're staying, what do you need? Bob studied Thompson's face, finding steady resolve of a man who'd spent his career protecting people. I need you to trust me and keep your officers away from Murphy's shell for a few days. It's still a crime scene. Then process it fast. They'll come for me there. It's where they know they can find me. How many are there? Could be more amateurs, could be professionals, could be an entire cell. Worst case scenario? Bob thought seriously. Worst case? They send someone like me. Federal agents arrived 47 minutes later. 3 SUVs, 8 tactical officers, 1 unhappy supervisor. Sergeant Sullivan, I'm Special Agent Crawford. You're coming with us. No. Crawford looked at Thompson. Chief, step outside. This is my office. This is federal matter. Agent Crawford, Bob interrupted. Chief Thompson knows my background, current status, threat assessment. Crawford's jaw tightened. You're in violation of protective agreement. My cover was blown when 3 professionals showed up with military intelligence. That doesn't happen by accident. What are you suggesting? Someone in your organization leaked my location. No matter where you relocate me, they'll find me again. Crawford was quiet. Even if true, staying puts civilians at risk. Running puts them at risk in the next town. Here, I can control variables. You can't fight an entire organization alone. Bob's smile was cold. I've done it before. Crawford consulted his tablet, reading Bob's record. His expression became more respectful and concerned. Even given your extensive background, this isn't sustainable. It's my choice. Crawford received instructions through his earpiece, finally looked up. I'm officially informing you that the federal government cannot guarantee your safety if you refuse custody. Understood. And any action you take in self-defense will be considered justified, provided it complies with law. Is that official sanction? Official acknowledgement that you're a civilian with right to defend yourself. After they left, Thompson asked, "What just happened?" "They gave me permission to handle this myself." "Why?" "Because if they move me and it goes wrong, it's their problem. This way, if something happens, it's just a local police matter. And if something happens to others, then I failed. And I don't plan to fail." 3 days later, Bob returned to Murphy's Shell. Jake had quit, understandably. Word had spread through Cedar Creek, but not the whole truth. People knew Bob had military training, but not about Delta Force. On the third night, Bob noticed a dark sedan watching him. At 11:47 p.m., his phone rang. "Hello, Bob." Eastern European accent, Russian. "You have the wrong number. Staff Sergeant Robert Sullivan, Delta Force. 200 confirmed kills. We have been looking for you." "What do you want?" "Justice for October 15th, 2010, for the compound that doesn't exist. You killed my brother with a knife, a 17-year-old medic trying to help wounded fighters. The boy with the medical supplies, Bob's biggest regret." "He was just a boy," the voice continued, "and now you will pay. We will take everyone you care about, Jake Morrison, Mrs. Patterson, Chief Thompson, one by one. Leave them out of this. They became part of this when they befriended my brother's killer." The line went dead. What happened next was never officially recorded. 3 days later, the people of Cedar Creek heard gunfire, saw smoke, watched helicopters take away bodies. The official story was federal arrest of fugitives. The unofficial story was that Bob Sullivan had reminded dangerous people why you don't mess with Delta Force operators. Bob continued working at Murphy's Shell, serving customers who had no idea they were being helped by one of the most dangerous men in the world. Because that's what heroes do. They don't seek recognition. They just protect people and disappear back into silence. Have you ever met someone like Bob? Someone who seemed ordinary but carried extraordinary secrets? Share their story in the comments. And if this moved you, hit subscribe. Because at the Untold Stories, we believe the most powerful tales are told in silence. The next time you meet someone a little too quiet, too watchful, remember Bob Sullivan. Heroes walk among us every day. Most of the time, we never know they're there, until the moment we need them most.